The 35 is the mirror to the 16. They sit beside each other in the wheel. They are mirrors for each other. They are both creative gates. They are creative gates in the duality of the collective process. The 16, the skill gate of logic. And on the 35, the skill gate of experience. The 35th gate, the 35, 36, this channel of transitoriness. This channel of transitoriness is the creative process of the abstract. Please understand what that means. That is that abstract creativity is the result of experiencing things. And it is out of that experience that they're able to enrich the lives of others. That's why the great storytelling gate, the 56, is part of the abstract process. To be able to tell the story, or the 33, to be able to remember the story, our oral tradition, our original learning tradition, all of that is rooted here in the 35. The 35th gate of progress. By design, progress cannot exist in a vacuum and is dependent on interaction. This cross, in the first 4 lines here of the 35, this cross is called the right angle cross of consciousness. And it has the 35 and the 5, and the 63 and the 64. The cross of consciousness. Once talent has been assessed, the 16.6, the next step is a line that it speaks in a language of creativity, more than just about any other line you'll meet. The first line of the 35 is called progress, and it's called humility, the ability to accept rejection. The ability to accept rejection. This is the basis of progress. It is the basis of experiential talent. This is where this horrendous expression, try, and try again, comes from. Venus exalted. The artist, it speaks in that language of creativity. The artist that accepts rejection as part of the process, or the Neptune in detriment, always fishy when Neptune is a foundation. Neptune in detriment, a destructive reaction to rejection, loss of worth. Everything about the collective creative process is determined by interaction, is determined by timing. And it is determined not simply by interaction and timing with others, but interaction and timing with the gods in the program. It is all about the muse. And the moment that you look at the first line, what it is really saying in terms of that humility is that transition doesn't necessarily happen right away. It's like the 16. The 16 saying there, I got the skills. I want to use them. And even when the 48 comes along that brings the depth, that says, I've got the depth for your skills, the two of them are saying, we want to use them, and they still have to wait. The 35 is sitting above an atomic bomb. The 35 is sitting above the emotional system, coming out of the 36. And that stream, the stream of feelings, the experiential stream that goes from the 41 to the 35 will never be aware. It's the only stream in the emotional system that will never be aware, never, ever. It's about fucking and running and chasing. It's about moving through the world of experience, but it is not aware. So that 35 up there, that 35 has to wait. But the moment that the connection is there, then it can act. Then it can jump. which means that it's an on and off process. And it means something else. If you compare the 1648 to the 3536, you will notice right away that the 3536 is going to be an awful lot more chaotic and have a lot more impact in the world. Not everybody can demonstrate to you their mastery of a skill, but just about everybody can tell you a story about their experience. The experiential way is a lot easier than the experimental way to manifest in this life. And more than that, the experiential way gets manifested through the wave of the emotional system. Very different. The 12 and the 35, these two gates in the throat that point towards the emotional system, they both have a braking system in them. The 35 in its voice says, I feel, and usually I feel like a change. Now there is a basic difference between these two gates. The 16 says, I need to experiment, which means I need to do the same thing over and over and over and over and over and over and over again. And the 35 says, I need to do something once and never do it again. The moment that the abstract person tries to be logical, they run into a lot of difficulties. You know, the logical musician picks up an instrument, plays it all their life. The abstract musician picks up an instrument, learns how to play it, puts it down. Picks up another instrument, learns how to play it, puts it down. Picks up another instrument, learns how to play it, puts it down. Picks up another instrument, learns how to play it, puts it down. Now, if you go to the logical person and ask them what instrument to play, they can only tell you their experience with their one instrument. And if you go to the experiential person, their great gift is to be able to say, the violin hurts your neck. You know, don't use the flute because your cheeks are going to look like apples. And goes through this whole process through their experience about being able to tell them which one is better than the other. The second line. This is a brutal line if you're not aware. Creative block. And you can see right away that these first two lines are specifically creative in their nature and lower trigram. You know, your own personal process. And remember that the collective is impersonal. It's why the stream of feelings presents so many problems sexually, because it is by its very nature collective and impersonal, and people take all that stuff personally and they end up getting hurt. And they end up taking their creative block personally. And they end up being hurt. Lack of inspiration, which stops progress. It's an ongoing process. It's really simple. The muse is there or it's not. The energy is there or it's not. And there's nothing you can do about it. You know, and if you try to do something about it and you don't have the energy, then you either end up being conditioned by others or you just crumble in frustration. It's about learning how to let go. The other thing is that, of course, what you have here is that you have somebody who is a second line and they don't know why things are on and off. They're not involved. They're just going about their business, and all of a sudden the creative process stops. They usually get very depressed instead of just waiting for it to come back again, because it will come back again. Venus exalted attunement with the vagaries of the muse, and the recognition creativity is energy that ebbs and flows. Period. Self-explanatory. The moon in detriment. The need to take action, however mundane, to overcome the feeling of emptiness. The actions being uninspired do not further progress. The need for change and the fear of stasis. And these people get incredibly upset when they can't continue their process. And then they go jumping, trying to find something that will make them feel good. And of course it doesn't. It doesn't. Again, this goes back to being able to live out your own nature. And it's always going to go back to that. If you live out your own nature, you enter into things properly. It's one of these concepts to keep in mind in terms of being aware of, how to integrate this knowledge in your daily process. It is much more difficult for you to integrate your type and authority where you already have long-established relationships. There are programs inherent in those relationships, hooks inherent in those relationships that make it very, very difficult. But the reality is that you keep on in your process, meeting new people in your life, bringing new forces into your life. And the key for you to recognize what it is to be yourself is that each new person in your life presents you with the opportunity to experiment at being you and entering into that relationship with them in your way. Because it's the entering in that matters, nothing else. See, if you enter in as yourself, you stay yourself. You won't lose it. And this is a key. So somebody who has this line of creative block, yes, that's true. It's going to be part of their life. That is, they're going to be isolated and alone and feel like there's nothing going on and nothing happening, and somebody will knock on their window. Somebody can bring them another possibility. And if they wait, even though they're uncomfortable, that energy will come eventually, transit, whatever, and they will have their opportunity to be able to manifest. But if they enter into that properly, if somebody says to them, and they're a generator, look, we need you to prepare a report, and they go, uh-huh. And they go home and they start working on that report, and they're a second line 35, and all of a sudden they can't do it. That's not a moment to break down and go hysterical. That's not a moment to take out the whip and start stripping the skin off your back because you failed as a human being. It's not that moment to say, this is not a job for me and I'm never going to do this again. It's just about letting go. The muse will come back. You'll be able to finish it. And if you can let go, it will come back to you. It will be all right. Because you entered in properly in the first place. But if you're a generator and you say to your boss, hey, I want to do that project, I can. And you take it home that night and you start and then you get stuck and you can't go anywhere, you're finished. You're finished. You can't do it. And you're going to make a fool out of yourself and you won't be able to bring it in. And depending on your design, you'll suffer according to your nature. So it's not about what your line is, what that detriment is, or what that exalted is. So help me, it does not matter. What matters is that you enter in as yourself, and then they will function and will operate properly. That's the key. And then you see the value of them. Creative block is essential. These are people that need to be forced in their genetic nature, need to be forced to stop, go outside, smell some flowers, take a break. And when you come back, you'll be able to complete it with a clearer perspective. It's just a built-in mechanism. It's not a curse. It's not a punishment. It only feels like that if you're unaware and you don't enter into your connections with others as yourself. Then it's really a problem. The third line. Collaboration. This is a line that gives its name to what synthesis is, what it is to be a human being. The whole is greater than the sum of its parts. Jupiter exalted, benefic encouragement of others that expands personal as well as communal progress. Benefic encouragement. Trial and error, of course. The whole thing about the 35 is that the 35 wants the 36. That's the energy font. The 35 is a gate of experience. The 36 is the gate of inexperience. experience. The 35 is the gate that is full and not hungry. It will only be hungry for a new experience that it hasn't had. Otherwise, it's bored to death. 35s can be very bored with food, with people, just bored because there isn't anything attractive enough, new enough. Remember that the motto of the 35, once it's mature, is been there, done that. And I don't have to do it again, and I don't have to go through all that nonsense again. The sun in detriment, the need to be the center that ignores the importance of others. Well, to collaborate with others has two ways. One can be very progressive, one can be very involved with other people's lives in a very positive way, and one could simply need to have all those people there and stay the focus, but still be beneficial to them. It's the benefits don't disappear. The difficulty with this line is that this is a trial and error line, and there are a lot of bruised people along the way, because it's not personal. I'll collaborate with you, but that doesn't mean I love you, care about you. That doesn't mean I want to collaborate with you tomorrow. It doesn't mean I want to share with you tomorrow. I want to share with you right now. This would be great. And if it works, terrific. But I still don't want to see you again because I have done it then. I want to go on to the next thing anyway. So this collaboration, don't take this as some kind of great, wonderful social mechanism. It's very good at superficial social connections. Hooking up with somebody in order to get through the experience, but then being ready to drop them. Remember that the 35 gets bored very quickly. The only time that the 35 isn't boring is when they're boring other people with their stories. That's when they're not bored. They're wonderful. When they're boring everybody else about what happened, they feel terrific. And when they can't tell anybody else what happened, they're bored. What to do in this life, eh? When we get to the fourth line, when we get to the upper trigram, we do obviously have a different kind of process. Remember that the third line's not transpersonal. That's why I tell you this collaboration sounds better than what it really is. It's not transpersonal. It's for their own purposes. I need to see what it's like to make love in a canoe. You're it today. That doesn't mean you're going to be it tomorrow. It doesn't even mean I'm going to remember your name, because that's a collective process. It's simply about fulfilling one's personal destiny and having somebody else there to allow it to take place, to get access to it. The fourth line is genuinely transpersonal. And as such, it has very, very good skills at being able to influence or recognize the other. And of course, particularly in the fourth line, this line of externalization of being influential, you have hunger, the insatiable appetite for progress. These people are fixed on that. Right? Have to have this progress. We have to have this change. There has to be something new to do, or I'm going to die of boredom. The detriment, Mars in detriment, the abuse of position to accumulate perks with the inevitable retribution of those unfairly deprived. The drive for progress that will ultimately step on toes and lead to recriminations. Now this goes back to this being collective. Please understand that. It's not personal. And people always take it personally. You're in a collective organization. And somebody gets who you've been working with, you bring them into the job. You get them that job. They get appreciated and they move ahead of you and suddenly become your boss. And you blame them for the way that they treat you now, because they treat you the way a boss treats you, and so forth and so on. In other words, what happens out of this is that when somebody progresses in the collective, there are others who complain and they try to make it personal. You did this to hurt me. You didn't care about me. You stepped over me on the ladder, so forth and so on. Tough. Really The things that people whine about. It's amazing to me. The drive for progress that will ultimately step on toes and lead to recriminations. It's just one of those things to understand about being collective. If you have collective definition, look at it carefully, because the collective definition that you carry is impersonal. Impersonal. Don't make it personal. You'll really suffer. It's the whole business about the problems that people have with the 1858 because of its critical capacity. That's collective. When they tell you that you should get new shoes, you ask them if that means that I should get new shoes and the rest of the planet should get new shoes, and what kind of shoes should the planet wear. It's collective. It's not personal. It's never going to be personal. This hunger isn't personal. It's a collective hunger for experience. This is the werewolf. This is where the broken heart is so common. You said you wanted me. We had such a wonderful time. You don't call me anymore. You used me. I'm a victim now. Blah, 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 blah. And the other one is telling stories. Wow, I had, never sees the person again. Eh? Wow, I had this night. It was absolutely fantastic. That's enough. For them, that's enough. That's what experience is for. So you get another story. Because it's the story that is the history of humanity. And that's the job of the abstract. Collect experience. I don't want to do Bill Clinton's trip, but at least we find out about it, don't we? That's the collective experience. We don't have to do it because we get the story from somebody else. Why we love books and movies and TV and all this stuff. Because this is the essence of what is collective. So while that person's heart is breaking because they took it all personal, the other one is living out their impersonal collective reality. That was great. It was so much fun. Ba-da-da-da-da-da-da-da. And if you ask them, well, why didn't you call that person back? Or why don't you have something to do with them? You had such a great time. It was da-da-da-da-da, blah, blah, blah. They look at you like you're nuts. What's the name of that movie that's been floating around? It's As Good as It Gets. For the 35, that's as good as it gets. There's this incredible moment. And if they keep that moment as an experience that they can share, they can relive the beauty of that moment, the specialness of that moment, the rest of their life. Which for them is much more rewarding than calling up that person again, only to discover that it's not going to turn out to be so incredible. And then they make it personal. And then they have a problem. Fifth line, altruism. The sacrifice of personal for communal progress. Again, the general being called practical, the practical experiences being called as a guide to those practical experiences, being projected on them that they can, being projected on them that they're altruistic. We know that you don't take things personally. We know that you're a collective being. We know that you care about us. We know you're going to share with us the way to go through this experience. And the general is saying, come on, smear me. Make me feel good. Tell me how wonderful I am. Tell me how much you need me. Mercury exalted. The principles of interaction and harmony communicated successfully for the benefit of the whole. Progressive communication that can bring beneficial changes to the whole when they're practical. We have a lot of experiential teachers. That is, these are technique teachers. Boys meet that in high school when they have their first woodworking teacher, You meet these technical creatures that show you how to do these things, that enter you into an experience which can be of benefit to others. And you're expected to share that. So if you haven't had the experience, you're in trouble. This is one of the things about the fifth line. That's where their uncertainty comes from. If you haven't had the experience, because that's the nature of what this is, you're not going to be able to fulfill the projection of others. Remember I told you the 16th gate is the gate of identification. The 35th gate is the gate of expectation. The abstract is handicapped by expectation. It is its most powerful force. It says if I do this, this, and that, I will get that. It's the carrot. It's always there. If I do this, I'll get that. If I do this, I'll get that. If I do this, I get that. Jupiter in detriment, though altruistic and cooperative in general, a personal regret that in interaction a greater personal expansion has been lost. This is one of the things that, it's a very important equation. It's the equation that says warriors must become teachers. There's a certain time in your life where you can be a warrior. It's legitimate. You're ready for it. You're physically and psychically prepared to be a warrior. But at the moment that that power begins to diminish, that's the moment that the warrior has to become the teacher. And this is so important about the abstract process. That is, abstract beings who keep on keeping on, when they get into the second half of their life and are still chasing one experience after the other, have not given up being warriors. And in not becoming teachers, they're not passing on that knowledge and that experience to others. The life of the warrior and the teacher is totally different. So unless the experience has been fulfilled, only then is it possible to be able to go back and share that experience over and over and over again, which is quite a step for the abstract being. That personal regret that says, yes, I'm teaching them all how to get through this kind of experience that I know so well, and that's wonderful for them, but now I'm stuck here teaching them, and I can't play warrior anymore. And it's a very important transition in the life. By the way, the timing for that is your Chiron return. That's the timing. The Chiron return is between the age of 50 and 51. That's a moment in which the warrior's life is over. And finally, the sixth line, rectification, the energy to correct. Again, what we know about six lines, the 35-6 getting into all kinds of experiences, only to recognize that they are not necessarily advantageous. And stepping out of that and watching others go through their experiences. But here you have the energy to correct. It is one of the most common things I see in charts is that people who have either the 18 or the 58 invariably have the 35 or the 36. I have seen that so often. And there is a connection, a deep connection in a sense, between them. Experience is a way of discovering correction, not of correcting. Out of experience, you discover something didn't work. Somebody else's experience can show you what didn't work for you and how it can work. So here in the sixth line rectification, we have the energy to correct, Saturn exalted. It says the process of crystallization coupled with ambition that assures timely and effective correction. They're very, very important people because they bring the ability to see what is valued experience. Great to ask a 35-6 what you can do to help yourself. They're very good, for example, as chiropractors. I know a lot of chiropractors who have this line. They're very good at telling you that you have to sort of change the position of your body or a new experience in the way you sit or move or whatever the case may be. But they are very helpful in that way. The Mars in detriment, a destructive tendency that in its personal application may be the necessary severity to ensure correction, but when applied generally, it will meet with resistance and tend to reinforce rather than rectify situations. Change here can only be seen in relationship to the harmonic of the emotional system. And this line basically is showing you the two aspects, the polarity of what happens in the wave. That is, the exalted is dealing with the high end of the wave and the detriment is dealing with the low end of the wave in that sense. Change is something that can be deeply, deeply frightening for people. If you have the 32nd gate, no matter how stable you seem to be, Change for you is always something that is destabilizing and so important for you to be able to handle and be clear about. Change can be very powerful. So this corrective experience that's possible, it can be both easy or severe. The detriment people of the 35-6, they're going to take you through experiences that really shatter you. Powerful corrective experiences. So that you get correction which brings change through severity and even destruction, and will always meet resistance. So you take somebody out of their suburban middle-class life, and you throw them into a survival program in the middle of the jungle somewhere. You're going to put them through a severe change that may in fact benefit them or kill them. That being the difference. Remember as well, again, when dealing with 6 lines, they will not go to that point unless it's really certain for them that that is the experience that is necessary. Think about the juxtaposition and the left angle here. We had the cross of consciousness, right angle. That was the 35 and the 5 with the 63 and the 4. So we stay with the 35 and the 5. We have the juxtaposition cross of experience. This is with the 47 and the 22. Now this cross of experience, these are people that are fixed on having experiences, and it does not abate when they get into the second half of their life. In other words, this is the pure experiential mover, and they will constantly seek out experience. When you get to the left angle, you have the left angle cross of separation. 35 and the 5, the 22 and the 47. Everything having to do with the 35 and the 16. To see very clearly how important these 2 gates are in being able to complete our collective process, and how unbalanced they are in relationship to their energy. The most important thing when dealing with the 35 is that the understanding of the nature of the wave and how the emotional system operates always has to be taken into consideration, because that's the outlet. When the 16 connects to the 48, what we have is a projector channel. And when the 35 connects to the 36, we have a manifesting channel. We have an emotional manifesting channel. No truth in the now. When the 1648 as a projected channel is not recognized, it becomes bitter. When the 3536 manifests without asking, it gets punished. So punishment is part of the experiential way, and it's full of anger. And talent is full of bitterness and lack of recognition. So the only criteria for a manifesting channel is that it finds its clarity. In this case, the 3536 is always going to have to wait. There is no truth in the now for it. We'll always have to wait out the wave in order to enter into any experience correctly. Oh, it's so important to keep that in mind, always. All of these things operate properly when you are operating out of your nature, all of them. And all of them distort and create problems the moment that you don't. From the 35-6, from this rectification, we continue and we move in the throat, and we come to the 45th gate. And it is something to recognize that the abstract process ultimately has to lead to the material plane, because you can't keep having experiences unless you can pay for them.